Marvel couple, director meets White Queen. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 31. Professor, are you leaving? Betty Ross said with a reluctant face, the laboratory is safe, you can rest assured, the experimental drug side, I have been noticed, so I can only slowly find a way. Banner was silent for 2 seconds, turned around and hugged the woman who had chosen to stand by his side from the beginning, and said softly, I have to get out of here, Betty, we're not people of the world, stay with me, I'll kill you sooner or later. 6 months ago, I almost got the Nobel Prize nomination, and I thought that my life had finally seen the light of day. But I didn't expect that this was just the beginning of a nightmare, and I had to face terrifying psychological pressure every day to suppress him in my body. Just 2 hours ago, I personally watched myself kill 10 servicemen and even smash several tanks. I don't want to drag you into a ghost who is not a ghost or a ghost, so I can only hide in the streets and alleys to survive. If I hadn't been exposed to gamma rays, none of this would have happened. But there is no turning back. Speaking of this, Banner actually cried. Like an orphan abandoned by the world. Northern United States, Alaska. Feng put his arm around the White Queen, sat in front of the fireplace, and looked at the snowy scene outside the floor-to-ceiling window, which was very comfortable. What he didn't know at all was, at some point in the future, Banner will appear in the city of Massa and even treat him as an enemy. The entire Marvel universe is subtly waking up and changing. At this time, Feng quietly put his palm into the White Queen's clothes. Ice. The White Queen glared at him. It's hot in a while. Feng smiled and said, Wife, let's go slay later, take a stroll in the snowy mountains, maybe we can meet a few wild bears, then we will be martyred. The White Queen gave him a blank look and snorted coldly. Husband, I am strong and strong, how can I be martyred? Feng waved his other fist and said with a smile, one punch to kill a bear, no pressure, is it really that strong? Well? The White Queen tilted her head, a weird playful smile on her face. Feng shook his head again and said with a sneer, let's talk about something else. What kind of TV series is Breaking Bad? The White Queen suddenly asked curiously, who are you going to hire as the protagonist? Feng thought for a while, brushed the plot he had seen in his previous life, touched his chin and said. It should be regarded as a movie in which the villain completes the redemption of life, and I haven't thought about the protagonist yet. Oh. The White Queen nodded understandingly, and then asked, then. Is there a god? God? Feng was stunned for a moment. What god? It's the gods. The White Queen said softly, that. An unhindered god between the god realms. Not really. Feng shook his head and said, why do you ask that? He didn't understand why the White Queen asked herself such a strange question. Breaking Bad is a relatively niche TV series. In the memory of a past life, the ratings were not bad. Feng planned to use it to expand the business of film and television companies, so he had this idea. That. Are you planning to make a movie about gods? This? When Mission Impossible 456 is released, it may be filmed. Oh. The White Queen nodded, and did not mean to continue asking. It's just that she thought in her heart, what method should be used to let Feng know and accept the existence of her. It seems difficult. Although he didn't know what the White Empress was doing when she asked these questions, Feng could also see that the White Empress had something on her mind. He didn't mean to ask, but after looking at each other affectionately for 2 seconds, he blocked the red lips of the White Queen with his lips. Doing it is always more direct than saying it, and it can also show Feng's intentions better. The White Queen, who was originally a little apprehensive, also submissively lay in Feng's arms at this time, enjoying the beauty of this moment. City of Kana, Academy of Mutants. As mutants like to show their heads more and more, coupled with the reason why Magneto continues to work among ordinary humans, today's mutant school can be described as precarious. Not long ago, the local government also sent nearly 10 helicopters to block the sky over the mutant school, claiming to protect the security of the territory, and Professor X talked for a long time before they were willing to leave. It's the base of the X-Men, and it's the only place for homeless mutants. If even this place becomes a victim of politics, I am afraid that the entire mutant society will fall into chaos. What's more, if Professor X hadn't sensed the existence of mutants through his ability and united them, this world would have given birth to more dangerous people like Magneto. But the trouble is that these days in the mutant school, there have been some uncontrolled emergencies. The Omega-level mutant known as Jean Grey disappeared. In fact, it is not a disappearance, more like being taken away by some mysterious force. As the only known Omega-level mutant in the X-Men camp, Jean Grey is definitely a protected target. Because her ability is too terrifying. At this time, Professor X is sitting in the brainwave amplification room, searching for Jean Grey's whereabouts through the densely packed electronic components. This state has lasted for nearly 5 hours. The biggest side effect of brainwave amplifiers is the damage to brain cells. Professor X's face was almost pale. Half an hour later, he struggled to remove the brainwave amplifier. The beast and the laser eye also took advantage of this gap to walk in. Professor, have you made any new discoveries? Laser eyes, with a pair of quartz eyes, asked Professor X anxiously. Professor X's face darkened, shook his head slightly, and said, still not. I expanded all the range and didn't notice any fluctuations in the power of the piano. Either she is in a coma and can't establish mental communication with me, or it was she who deliberately hid and refused to contact me. Speaking of this, Professor X sighed. If it's the latter, then it's good to say that Jean is a very sensible girl. But if it's the former, I'm worried that she will be used by someone with a heart. These words made the laser eye and the beast change color slightly. Jean Grey has had a close relationship with all X-Men since she was accepted into the mutant school. She is a very gentle and kind girl. Even in order not to let the Phoenix power in his body hurt others, he was willing to bear these pains alone. But such a girl who only thinks about her friends when she encounters danger has somehow disappeared. It is not common sense, it is very contrary to common sense. Where did she go? Where will it go? Episode 32, you mean, it's possible that Magneto took her? Laser Eye gritted his teeth and said, this haunted guy is said to have returned to the United States. If he really took Jean, I must slaughter him with my own hands. It could be Magneto, or it could be others. Professor X rubbed his brow and said, people we all fear. Anyone else? The Beast is a member of the X-Men veteran level, and he is also more careful, and a figure instantly appeared in his mind. You mean that guy named Feng? When Laser Eye heard this, he suddenly remembered the collision between Professor X and Feng when they were in Stark Mansion before. In this world, mutants who can suppress Professor X's mental ability can count one finger. But that guy named Feng shouldn't know Jean Grey, right? And how could it take him? Don't forget, there is another person beside Feng. The Beast pushed his glasses and said solemnly, once betrayed us. Emma. Her relationship with Jean has always been much better than ours, and I vaguely remember that Emma tried to convince Jean Grey to leave here with her before she left the mutant school and followed Magneto. Emma. White Queen. As the laser eye with the best relationship with Jean Grey, after hearing that there was a target, he immediately couldn't sit still, turned around and planned to leave. He said, we have to go to Massa City again and meet that guy. Laser eyes, wait. Professor X shook his head to stop him and said, let's go. It's useless. According to my guess, Feng is likely to be an Omega-level mutant, and the power is still above the piano. If we risk getting him into trouble like this, we are likely to pay for it. What if the piano is really in his hands? Laser Eye clenched his fists and said word by word, if Emma does convince Jean to join Magneto, then the X-Men will lose their qualifications to be on a par with them. I'll go with you. At this time, Uncle Wolf suddenly walked in from outside the door, holding an unlit cigar in his mouth, and said with an indifferent face, he can't kill me. Professor X and the Beast looked at each other, and finally did not choose to stop it. There is no way around this. Jean Grey's whereabouts are a crucial matter for them. Because they all know that in addition to the two possibilities that Professor X said, there is a third possibility. It's that Jean is dead. After any mutant dies, it cannot be detected by the brainwave amplifier. As the youngest and most powerful mutant of the X-Men, they have to seize every possible hope. After Mjolnir was snatched away by a tall man, Coulson reported the matter to Nick Fury for the first time. For S.H.I.E.L.D., this alien object is definitely one of the treasured items worth studying. It didn't take long for S.H.I.E.L.D. to block all sources from the moment it fell within the territory of the United States. But Mjolnir was still taken away. In addition, the huge mechanical monster that can breathe fire from nowhere even caused disasters in suburban cities, indirectly killing dozens of ordinary humans. This made the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., who had long been a bully on the territory of the United States, angry. After sealing all the information related to the destroyer, Nick Fury immediately asked all the agents to search for the person who took Mjolnir. His intuition told him that the mastermind behind these changes and disasters must be inseparable from that guy. But what neither Nick Fury nor Coulson expected was that although S.H.I.E.L.D. agents deployed within the territory of the United States, they did not find any news related to it. This guy suddenly disappeared as if he had evaporated from the world. This is a very offensive to the existence of S.H.I.E.L.D. In order to solve this trouble, Nick Fury decided to send someone to capture Thor's girlfriend, Jane Foster, for interrogation. That is, the woman who had been invaded by the reality gem. But, what he didn't expect was, before anyone was sent, the man who took away the quake of Thor actually found the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters himself. Yes. Just an hour earlier, Thor had broken into S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters and got into a fight with several agents. Those agents, without exception, were all seconds by him. Of course, Thor didn't kill them, he just stunned them. After all, the purpose of his coming here is not to find trouble, but to find people. But Nick Fury's side did not know who Thor really was, let alone what he wanted to do, so he directly sent Hawkeye and Black Widow to move with him. As a result, it's still the same. Pressed and beaten. Thor is also a divine body no matter what, so there is not much pressure to face these two. Just when Nick Fury decided to ask Stark to do it, Portal took the initiative to inform him of his purpose. Thus, it became the current scene. Nick Fury looked at Thor with a gloomy face and asked, "You say it again?" "I said, I am God, God from Asgard." Thor looked helpless, sat on the sofa, picked up a bottle of cocktail casually, and complained while drinking. "I said, what is going on with you Earth mortals? Don't understand what I'm saying? I have to repeat it several times, especially you wearing an eye patch. Do you need me to give you an electrotherapy? Cheap. It's so cheap. This look is indebted and arrogant." Nick Fury took a deep breath and said, "This hammer you are holding in your hand is called Mjolnir's hammer?" "Yes, does it sound good?" Thor flicked it casually and said with a smile, "If you promise me a few requests, I'll let you touch them. But I have to remind you that generally only people with strong courage and fighting spirit will be recognized. You. It is estimated that it will not work." Nick Fury's cheeks twitched violently twice. He took a deep breath again, suppressed the urge to immediately call Stark to beat this guy up, and asked patiently, "You said, you are here to find someone, who are you looking for?" "My sister." Thor shrugged his shoulders and said, "To be precise, she is not human. She's a god." On the side, hearing this, Coulson couldn't help but roll his eyes. No way? In this universe, is there really a so-called god? Of course, besides that, I also brought you some benefits. Thor snorted and stood up, walked up to Nick Fury, stared at him and said, "I know that your organization called S.H.I.E.L.D. is very powerful, just like Asgard's status in the Nine Realms. If you can help me find my sister, Hela, then I will take your people to Asgard to experience the life of the divine realm, and maybe use this marriage to create a new alliance. We are not interested in God." Nick Fury sneered, "In my eyes, the so-called gods are just creatures of another universe. Although your power is very strong, there may not be no more powerful existence in this world. If you want me to help, you've got to show some sincerity. For example, join S.H.I.E.L.D. The tone is simple and the purpose is obvious." This time, it was Thor's turn to be upset. Episode 33, Let the Asgardians Work for S.H.I.E.L.D.? Are you kidding? Did this group of Earthlings recognize their status? Stop wasting time, one-eyed. Thor waved the hammer in his hand and said bluntly, "You Earthlings will not understand what kind of existence the gods are. I'm too lazy to explain so much to you. If you can help me find my sister, maybe I can join some tattered S.H.I.E.L.D. But I have one request, which is that I will not obey anyone. In your Earth parlance, it's human affection. Understood?" Nick Fury and Coulson next to him looked at each other, pondered for 2 seconds, and finally agreed with Thor's idea. Although he is not very interested in the word God, but now that the Avengers are in preparation, it is not a wise choice to let go of such a powerful teammate. "You just told us that your sister's name is Hela, isn't it?" Nick Fury casually picked up a tablet from the table and asked. "Yes." Thor knew he had decided to help himself and nodded in satisfaction. Access to statistics with the word Hela in global names. Nick Fury said a word to the tablet, and within 3 seconds, a string of real-time data was displayed on the screen. There are 3,123 people in the world named Hela. Among them, the United States occupies 235 people. All of Sakura country occupies 1,021 people. The whole country occupies 1,001 people. The number of S.H.I.E.L.D. registered in East Africa, South Africa, and other S.H.I.E.L.D. is 865. So many? Nick Fury paused and frowned. "Thor, can you provide photos? There are so many people that we can't find your sister exactly by just one name. Searching so blindly is like finding a needle in a haystack. Besides, you said you were from Northern Europe, but I haven't heard of a Norse god called Hela." Tolmor clenched his chin and recalled. "Portrait? I've only seen her look like on the frescoes in Asgard, but it's vague. I can't provide the exact looks, but I can describe it to you." After pondering for more than 10 seconds, Thor said to Nick Fury, "It doesn't matter, we have the most advanced AR repair system. As long as you provide some details, we can do 99% restoration." Nick Fury nodded and said. Half an hour later. After the restoration of S.H.I.E.L.D's artificial system, a face with endless arrogance in the cold appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Nick Fury patted Thor on the shoulder and said, "How? The kingdom of God doesn't have this technology, does it?" Thor tugged at the corners of his mouth, which was considered a response. All his eyes were focused on the face in front of him. Too much like. It's too much like an Asgardian. The pride that can only be contained in the eyes, and the charm that only Asgardian people have. It should be her. Thor made a decision and nodded to Nick Fury. Nick Fury did not hesitate, when even said to the technician in front of him, "Start the face recognition system, call out the fragments that this face has appeared within our control range, pay attention, to start the precise range search. I don't want to see you get out a bunch of garbage, and then let us spend time looking for them one by one." Yes. The S.H.I.E.L.D. technician nodded, and his eyes became sharp as he looked at the screen. An hour later, a fragment appeared in front of everyone's eyes. In the clip, a tall woman wearing a dark green robe and black hair is covering her chest, staggering in an alley with surveillance video, looking like she has been seriously injured, and the whole person is a little sluggish. At the same time, to the surprise of Nick Fury and others, this woman's face had mysterious lines, and there were green rays of light wrapped all over her body. When the tall woman in the video walked out of the alley, she seemed to be physically exhausted, and the whole person fell to the side of the street with only dim street lights. Thor subconsciously held his breath. 2 minutes later, a girl in a long white dress came from the side of the street, spotted the green figure, crouched in front of it, and gently lifted the black hair covering her face. It was also at this time, a strange green light flashed, and the figure on the ground that had lost its movement suddenly woke up, and turned into a beam of light, burrowing into the young girl's eyebrows. The girl trembled, and after a flash of green light in her eyes, she fell to the ground. Video, this is the end of the story. In the hall of S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, Thor froze in place, with bruises on his forehead, and Mjolnir emitted a slight thunderous sound as if it had been inducted by some kind. "It's her." Thor gasped and stared at the screen. "She's my sister." Nick Fury pondered for a few seconds, and continued to say to the technician, "Record the girl's appearance and compare the database." "Director, the video is a little blurry, and the face is sideways. The comparison results may not be accurate." "It's okay, do as I say." Another 10 minutes later. Basic information and materials on young girls were retrieved. When Nick Fury saw this face, the whole person was stunned in place. If he hadn't experienced so many strange events, I am afraid it would be difficult to calm down at this moment. "Emma? Daughter of the richest man in Massa?" Thor looked at the information on the screen and slowly read the young girl's name. Yes. The young girl who touched the green light figure in the video happened to be the White Queen. "Where is this girl?" Thor turned back to Nick Fury and said, "I suspect that my sister entered her body with a divine body, and I want to find her." However, Nick Fury can't care about this now, and his mind is full of what Thor just said. God of death, Hela? Asgard's heir to the throne? No, it's such a coincidence, right? Did you say? The reason why that man named Feng is so strong is because... Nick Fury didn't dare to continue thinking about it. He felt that this possibility was increasing. Perhaps, the daughter of the richest man in Massa has long been not that daughter, but an alien who fell from the dwelling place of the gods to the earth. Lost in thought, Nick Fury didn't notice. Everything that happened in this office was watched by the guard standing at the door of the hall. This guard, named Grant Ward, is the head of a security department of S.H.I.E.L.D., and usually does not have access to the core of S.H.I.E.L.D., and he is deployed to the headquarters after the American team awakens. At the same time, he is also a Hydra agent who has been infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. for a long time. He carefully observed Nick Fury's reaction through the psychological observation method learned inside S.H.I.E.L.D., and he deeply imprinted this matter in his mind. Episode 34, A God Who Fell on Earth? If this so-called God can be used by Hydra. A sneer rose in Grant Ward's heart. As an undercover agent who can inherit his father's business and lurk in S.H.I.E.L.D. for so long, his ability is beyond doubt. It can even be said quite. His hiding ability is no worse than that of Black Widow and Hawkeye. Therefore, from the moment Thor walked into S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, he was completely able to think of all possibilities based on Nick Fury's reaction. This secret will also be introduced to Hydra after a few years. Soon, everyone walked out of the headquarters hall. Thor, the god of thunder, accompanied by many S.H.I.E.L.D. high-ranking officials, temporarily stayed in the villa area arranged by S.H.I.E.L.D., and as a god who came to Earth from Asgard, his status and importance are self-evident. Nick Fury didn't tell him he knew the young girl in the video, and he made up a system error to fool Thor. Because even he himself was not sure that the god named Hela was in the body of the White Queen. After leaving the headquarters, Nick Fury did not focus on Thor, but walked into his office and saved all the information of the White Queen and Li Feng in the highest authority cloud disk of S.H.I.E.L.D, which means that anyone who wants to view the information related to it must obtain his permission consent. After doing all this, his tense body gradually relaxed. Looking out the window at the sunlight, he narrowed his eyes and muttered to the air. This secret is really unexpected. Did you say yes? Li Feng, I don't know if you, who share a bed with her day and night, are aware of it. Sleeping with a god from outside the sky? Are you kidding? Nick Fury scoffed at his thoughts. Oh God. What a noble thing. Having a god as a wife is a beautiful fantasy that only appears in movies, right? This guy named Li Feng really went luck. Meanwhile, just after Grant Ward watched Nick Fury leave the headquarters, he quietly stole his colleague's IC card, touched it into the file room, and opened the door of the inventory, trying to find all the information related to Li Feng and the White Queen. And yet, what he didn't expect was that although he found the information, the file had already been set to the highest authority. This permission can only be possessed by Nick Fury. Damn. Grant Ward gritted his teeth and had to give up his idea. If he forcibly applies for permission with his S.H.I.E.L.D. Department IC card, then he will be targeted by Nick Fury immediately. The guy with the black blindfold has a nose as sensitive as a hunting dog. With his current status, he simply cannot compete head-on. While S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra are conspiring because of Thor's appearance, there are also some unpredictable turmoil on the side of the mutant school. Laser Eye and Wolverine originally planned to go to Li Feng to inquire about Qin's whereabouts, and even the two were ready to make a move with Li Feng. But when they arrived in Masa City, they found that Li Feng was not at home at all. Moreover, no one knows where he went. They went to Li Feng's villa, but found no traces. Even if they wanted to fight with Li Feng, they didn't have this opportunity. This result almost made the Laser Eye run away. If Li Feng was not found, Qin's whereabouts would be lost, and they had to continue to search aimlessly in the vast sea of people. That's too much time wasted. Maybe if you find the old in your life, you may not be able to find the trace of the piano. At this time, the more mature beasts in the X-Men came up with a way. It's simple. Through the stimulation of sleeping pills, Professor X is fully put into a mental state, so that his sensing ability can cover the entire United States in a short time, and all mutants in this area will be marked. Even if they don't use mutant abilities, they can still be sensed. But the consequences of this are also clear. Once Professor X's most powerful mental abilities are amplified, it means that his brain will be subjected to even more terrifying pressure. This side effect will allow Professor X to accelerate aging, which is often called reduced lifespan. In this regard, Laser Eye and Wolverine, Storm Girl and others vigorously objected. After all, Professor X was not in good health, and if he forcibly did this, the damage would be great. But Professor X did not listen to the advice, but insisted on getting into the brainwave amplification room, took sleeping pills, and entered a mental state. For this man, who can only sit in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, any child who grows up in a mutant school is his family. So, he had to do it. This plan is also indeed feasible. After further expanding his sensing ability, although Professor X did not find the whereabouts of Jean, he found his old rival, Magneto. He sensed that beside Magneto, a mutant aura that he had never seen before appeared. Moreover, it is very likely that it is also an Omega-level mutant. This discovery made Professor X feel that something was wrong for a while. In order to see the mutant more clearly and enter his mind, Professor X took 1 times the sleeping pills again. But what he didn't expect was that the mutant aura that followed Magneto directly launched an extremely powerful spiritual attack as if it had discovered him. This caused Professor X's spiritual world to be hit hard again and forcibly awakened. But the trouble is that the side effects of sleeping pills are too great, and Professor X has been awake for less than a minute and completely lost consciousness. This sudden situation caused Wolverine and the others to fall into a burst of anxiety. The extreme Laser Eye determined that the reason why Professor X was in a coma was exactly the same as when he met Li Feng, and it was caused by the other party. There had never been such a moment, and Laser Eye hated Li Feng immensely. He decided to squat in Masa City, wait for Li Feng to appear, and then ask why he, the mutant, wanted to do something to Professor X. What happened in the mutant school, Li Feng naturally did not know. Even anything related to mutants, Li Feng didn't pay much attention. As for Jean Grey's disappearance, let alone mention it. Not only did he not want to be involved with S.H.I.E.L.D, but he also did not want to be involved with mutants. Both organizations carry inexplicable responsibilities on their backs. Why should he be unhappy? At this time, Li Feng and the White Queen were wearing thick storm jackets, sitting on the sled dragged by Alaskan Malamutes, galloping on the ice full of snow. Episode 35. This is their second day in Alaska. Although watching the snow all day and all night was really a bit boring, but with such a superb company as the White Queen by his side, Feng did not feel lonely. On the contrary, the two tried many unspeakable things in the snow. With good people, how can you be in the mood to enjoy the scenery? 5 days later, Feng and the White Queen returned to Masa City on a special plane. At this time, on the tarmac of the private airport, dozens of bodyguards in suits were already waiting. These people were all bodyguards sent by the richest man in Masa City to protect the White Queen, and some of them were also people that Feng knew. "Mr. Li, we will send you back to the villa next. The car is ready, please follow me. If you have other arrangements, you can let me know and we will change the destination." For these people's verbosity, Feng was used to it. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go home first, my wife is a little tired." "Yes." The two got into an extended version of Lincoln and gradually moved away under the adoring gaze of many civilians at the airport. The interior of the car is extremely comfortable, and there is a bartender dedicated to serving Feng and the White Queen. Although Feng received a socialist education before crossing over, he has to admit that capitalism does have something to be praiseworthy. For most wealthy people, capitalism is much more convenient and more enjoyable. There are many things that you don't need to worry about, and naturally, there will be a service team to arrange everything for you. That's the benefit of being a tycoon. Isn't it more binding than fighting with aliens in 3 days? After 5 days in the snow, the White Queen felt a little tired at the moment, curled up next to Feng and took a nap gracefully. Although with the physique of the White Queen mutant, he will not feel cold in the ice and snow of minus tens of degrees, but I can't bear that Feng has some unique requirements. Looking at the snow-white mountains every day, Feng definitely wanted to have some fun. And the White Queen was naturally unfortunate and didn't even have to run. 5 days. I can't count how many times. Listening to the calm breathing of the beautiful man in his ears, Feng's heart gradually quieted down. Half an hour later, Lincoln stopped in front of his villa. The bodyguard stayed outside the villa very sensibly. Feng woke up the White Queen, who was a little red-faced, and the two walked into the villa together. And yet, as soon as the two arrived in the hall, Feng paused in his steps. Since opening the Steppenwolf template, his divine sense and sixth senses have been extremely keen. He heard a beating heart in the cellar of his villa. Bang. 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 Extremely rhythmic. Someone broke into their own villa? Feng narrowed his eyes, sent the White Queen into the bedroom, and after telling her to rest well, he came to the entrance of the cellar, ready to check the situation. In general, no homeless person can break into the villa under the supervision of bodyguards outside the villa. So, either the bodyguards are in jail and stealing, or mutants ran in. Here in the end it is his house, it is his private property, and he does not like the presence of some unfriendly objects on his territory, which will make him uncomfortable. Just as Feng was slowly groping into the cellar, Bruce Banner, lying in a pile of drinks, has become a drunk who can't wake up no matter how he screams. After fleeing the city full of soldiers, Bruce Banner arrives in the city of Masa and infiltrates the cellar while the bodyguards outside the door change shifts. For this PhD, who almost won the Nobel Prize, the only thing that can make his situation better is alcohol. Miraculously, as soon as he drank, the guy called Hulk in his body was unusually quiet. So, Banner hid in this luxurious villa. When he saw that the cellar was full of precious red wine, the whole person was excited. You can finally get a good night's sleep and don't have to worry about someone chasing you. The owner of this villa looks like a rich and powerful guy, and there are so many bodyguards outside, it is impossible for any military guy or the like to drive a tank to break in. However, the only thing to note is when the owner of this villa will return. After returning, how will Banner explain? Or rather, a punch to death. After being dominated by the Hulk for a long time, Banner's temperament has also undergone some changes. Humans are strange creatures who fear slaughter, but also love slaughter. At this time, Banner, who was in a drunken state, suddenly faintly heard footsteps in his ears. The experience of escaping from all over the world these days has made his vigilance many times stronger than before, and even if he is drunk like this, his subconscious makes him stay vigilant. When he heard footsteps coming from the stairs where he turned his feet, Banner's first reaction was trouble. He struggled to get up, trying to find a place to hide, but the effects of alcohol still didn't dissipate. He accidentally fell to the ground again, making a loud noise. This made Banner completely panicked. He began looking around, trying to find a perfect shadow to hide his sight, but it was too late. The man, who was slowly walking down the stairs, appeared in front of him. 4 eyes opposite. The former had a touch of panic in his eyes, like the horror of a thief after being caught. The latter had a faint doubt in his eyes, and there was even a playful look on his face. The air quieted down at this moment. Bruce Banner saw that Li Feng did not speak, and he did not dare to move at will. He was trying his best to suppress the Hulk agitation in his body. "Dr. Banner?" Li Feng suddenly said such a sentence. "What?" Banner thought he had misheard. "I know you." Li Feng smiled at him, then turned his head to look at the fine wine in the place, and asked suspiciously, "You? When did you run in?" "Probably 3 days ago." Banner subconsciously answered the question, but quickly regretted it. "Isn't this not self-defeating?" No, sir, please forgive me, I'm not malicious, I'm just smelled the wine, so I broke into your territory, but I don't have any malice, please believe me, I am a doctor of scientific research, I can compensate for any losses here, please don't call the police." Banner quickly wiped his face and explained to Li Feng. "Don't be nervous, Dr. Banner." Li Feng seemed to have guessed something, stretched out his hand and patted his shoulder, and said, "If I'm not mistaken, you should have become an A-class wanted criminal in the military, right?" "You? How do you know?" Banner's sweaty hair stood on end, and he took several steps back. Knowing that he is a wanted criminal is nothing more than two kinds of people, either friends he can trust or people from the military. Episode 36. Li Feng was naturally a little helpless, he never thought that it was this product that broke into his villa. He opened his phone and glanced at the date. This point in time corresponds to the above. The Hulk has appeared. Dr. Banner is also wanted. But why did he find his home? Why did this guy run to the city of Massa? This kind of coincidence, which could not be called a coincidence, made Li Feng's heart more and more uneasy. But he didn't show it on his face, because he knew that with Banner's character, this guy didn't pose much of a threat to himself. "Dr. Banner, do you feel a little familiar when you look at me?" Li Feng suddenly smiled at Banner and said. "You?" Banner wiped some of the fog off his glasses, rubbed his eyes again, and stared at Li Feng carefully for tens of seconds before shaking his head and saying, "I don't know you." Li Feng was speechless again, so he had to ask, "Have you seen The Expendables?" "Oh. It's you." Banner was stunned for a moment, and then said in surprise, "You? Are you Director Li Feng?" "Yes, it's me." Li Feng smiled at him slightly. "A few months ago, you asked someone to send me a letter, saying that you wanted to find me a signed photo for your girlfriend, and you were willing to publicize me in a college lecture, remember?" Remember. The defensiveness on Banner's face gradually faded, and he wiped his wrist and wanted to shake hands with Li Feng. "Don't, let's take a shower before you shake." Li Feng spread out his hands and waved, refusing this action. "Yes." As Li Feng said, Dr. Banner sent him a letter a few months ago. "That's what the letter says." Li Feng did not refuse, he was still preparing for the movie and preparing for the wedding at that time, so he didn't want to have much contact with the main characters of the Marvel Universe, so he casually asked the agent to take a photo to sign and send it back. The friendship between the two is not great, but it can be regarded as a response to each other. For Li Feng, Dr. Banner is a very honest guy in the Marvel Universe. Honestly, he trusts other people too easily. But this did not mean that Li Feng hated him. On the contrary, Li Feng admired his contributions in the field of scientific research. 7 doctorates. Gamma rays are produced. These honors can be regarded as the more prominent existence in the Marvel Universe. "Oh, sorry." Banner awkwardly withdrew his hand and said, "Director Li Feng, I didn't expect this to be your villa, how offensive, don't be angry, it's okay." Li Feng waved his hand at him and said, "You go take a shower first, I'll wait for you in the living room, and if you have anything to say, I'll talk later." After that, he turned and left, not giving Banner a chance to continue speaking. Banner stood in place and thought for a while, let down his guard, and followed Li Feng out of the cellar. 20 minutes later. The two sat on the living room sofa. Li Feng poured a glass of whiskey for Banner and said, "It is not a wise choice to come to me to take refuge, Dr. Banner, I have seen the trouble you made in that city, the military will find you sooner or later, and I can't provide you with a stable shelter." In order to avoid Banner becoming suspicious, Li Feng found a reason. "Can't say that he already knew that Banner would turn into the Hulk, right?" Hearing this, a trace of doubt in Banner's eyes disappeared, he raised the cup in his hand, poured it fiercely, and said, "Those guys don't want to listen to my explanation at all. If they want to believe me, things don't have to be so bad. I tried my best, there is no way to suppress that huge guy. As long as I am angry, I have no consciousness. Those situations are really not under my control. Director Li Feng, you have to believe me. I trust you very much, Banner." Li Feng looked at him seriously. He knows that the current Banner is not the Banner who followed the Avengers to the universe. In the final analysis, he is just an ordinary person who has encountered a huge change in his life, and most ordinary people cannot accept such changes. Banner, too. The only difference is that Banner is smart and knows how to measure his situation. However, Feng did not intend to intervene in this matter. Anyway, it would not be long before S.H.I.E.L.D. would find this unlucky bastard. At that time, no one in the military can pose a threat to him anymore. What are you going to do next? Feng said again, I can provide you with money, a sum of money to let you leave the United States. This? Banner looked at Feng with some emotion and said, thank you so much, Director Feng. I think this is definitely a blessing for me. However, I suggest you better leave today. Feng looked at the time and said calmly, my villa has been frequenting some government people recently, and if they find you here, they may arrest you. After that, he took out a bank card from his pocket and handed it to Banner. There's $1 million in it, and how you spend it is your business. Million. Banner's fingers trembled, and the bank card fell directly to the ground. How? Too little? Feng was stunned for a moment. $1 million does seem a little less for a PhD? No, sir, it's too much. The corner of Banner's mouth smiled bitterly, and his tone was bitter. I have done scientific research all my life, and I have never received so much money at one time. Take it, raise your hand. Feng tugged at the corners of his mouth and said with a smile, Dr. Banner, it's nice to meet you, good luck. Hearing this, Banner also knew that Feng did not call the police to arrest him, which was enough to give him face. If the nearby military received the news, then Feng would definitely be in great trouble. Therefore, he did not mean to continue to disturb Feng, nodded, sadly picked up the bank card on the ground, and was ready to turn and leave. Thank you, Director Feng, if I have the opportunity, I will find a way to repay you. You're welcome, $1 million is less than 10% of a movie's revenue for me. Feng always had a harmless smile on his face. Although he does not intend to cross paths with the Hulk, this does not mean that he needs to be indifferent. Leave a line and everything. You are your Hulk, I make my movie, have time to have a meal and drink tea together, and everyone is happy. Before Banner turned around, he bowed to Feng and didn't say anything more. Feng had no intention of retaining. Banner left, good for both sides. And yet, at this moment, on the stairs leading to the bedroom, there was a sudden sound of footsteps. Banner, who was about to walk out the door, subconsciously glanced back. I saw a woman with an excellent figure and a snow-white body rubbing her sleepy eyes and walking down the stairs. Episode 37, Husband, a guest is coming? The White Queen glanced at Banner, and her pretty face became a little cold. In front of outsiders, she does not show unnecessary emotions. Feng was about to introduce the two sides to each other, but suddenly stopped. Banner, who was standing at the door, also realized something, bowed his head and fell silent. Even the White Queen on the stairs inadvertently frowned, and a solemnity flashed in her eyes. This is because, in the perception of the three, outside the entire villa, there are already nearly dozens of tanks, helicopters, and nearly 100 soldiers. Obviously, the speculation in Feng's heart became a fact. This world, in the end, is a world ruled by the military. Even if Dr. Banner could run, he would not be able to run the military's intelligence network. Alas. Banner sighed and sat down on the couch rather dejectedly, his face full of exhaustion. He didn't want to run away anymore. At this time, there was a knock on the door outside the living room. Feng stood up, shook his head at the White Queen, and signaled her to return to her room first, then walked towards the door by herself and opened the door. What came into view was a young man in military uniform. There was a little indifference and pride in his eyes, and he said lightly to Feng as he spoke, Boy, this matter has nothing to do with you, let Banner come out. Feng glanced at him lightly. If he guessed correctly, this guy wearing the rank of sergeant and with a face full of beatings should be the man named Emil Blonsky in The Invincible Hulk, and the lizard monster called Abomination. Who let you break in? Feng was not impressed by this guy's arrogance, but asked, could it be that the current US military already has the right to break into other people's private homes at will? In this part of the United States, even if the police enter the house to search, there must be a search warrant, not to mention the soldiers who can hold weapons of mass destruction anytime and anywhere. In the eyes of the military, there is no place in this world that cannot be visited. Emil Blonsky sneered, took out the pistol pinned to his pocket, and said, I repeat, boy, if you don't want to die, get away and release the guy hidden in your room. I warn you, he is a very dangerous figure. Are you threatening me? Feng smiled back. You don't have this qualification yet. Emil Blonsky pointed to his military uniform and said, keep your eyes open to see what I'm wearing. Just when Emil Blonsky and Feng were deadlocked, Dr. Banner took the initiative to come up and pat the latter's shoulder. I'll come, Mr. Li. You've helped me a lot. This is my destiny, I can't escape. I don't want to involve you. Taking the initiative to expose his own banner calmed down the fertat confrontation between Li Feng and Emil Bronsky. Emil Bronsky no longer looked at Li Feng with arrogant eyes, but had more killing intent. Banner's attitude towards reality made Li Feng swallow the words in his throat. Originally, he was still thinking about whether to protect Banner again. After all, no matter how awesome the military of the United States is, it does not have the ability to fire at a well-known celebrity like him. But now it seems that Banner has given up on himself and does not want to run away anymore. This is not surprising. There were more than a dozen tanks parked outside, and even if he really wanted to run, this group of soldiers had to leave first. The devil knows how long they will stay? Moreover, if Banner did not come forward just now, it would definitely make Li Feng in trouble. That's one reason for Banner's decision. Looking at Banner, Li Feng finally did not choose to intervene and nodded to him. After all, no matter what, this is also his and the White Queen's home. If the military and the Hulk fight here, I am afraid that in a few minutes, their homes will be razed to the ground. I told you. After seeing Dr. Banner come out, Emil Bronsky tugged at his collar and said in an icy tone, even if you hide in the stinking gutter, I will catch you, remember? Dr. Banner looked at him expressionlessly, without any fear in his eyes, only with a faint disdain. This kind of gaze made Emil Bronsky very unhappy. His face twitched twice, turned his head to look at Li Feng, sneered, and said, I didn't recognize you when I entered the door, now I know who you are, the famous director Li Feng. I didn't expect to have a relationship with the military A-class wanted criminal. You are not afraid that the media will come to destroy your home? It seems more likely that your military will overturn my villa than the media. Li Feng smiled lightly and said, also, Sergeant, next time you dare to threaten me so much at my door, I think you will definitely be severely punished. Are you threatening me? Emil Bronsky sneered, looked at Li Feng condescendingly, and said, believe it or not, I'll let the tanks outside level your door now, just try. Li Feng smiled, and while his eyes were cold, a powerful sense of oppression slowly overflowed from his body. Enough, Sergeant. At this time an old man with white hair and 2 stars on his shoulder walked over. General Ross. Li Feng recognized this old guy almost at a glance. If there is anyone who is the biggest winner in The Incredible Hulk, it is undoubtedly this old guy who sits in the position of general, but is still sophisticated, extremely scheming. General. Emil Bronsky saw General Ross approaching and quickly bowed his head towards him. Director Li Feng, my daughter likes your book very much. General Ross curled the corners of his mouth and smiled, stretching out his hand towards Li Feng rather gentlemanly. Yes? Li Feng replied calmly. He didn't want to have any contact with this old man. After all, he is one of the villains of the Marvel Universe. In the future, I will know less unclean people. Concentrate on making your films when you are a civilian. This kind of thing that you shouldn't touch, never touch. There's nothing easier than making money, right? After General Ross smiled and dropped a few words at Li Feng, he turned around and ordered his men to take Dr. Banner away. Finally, when he walked out of the gate of the villa, he glanced back at Li Feng with a slight warning in his eyes. After all, no matter how you say it, Li Feng is currently also the most famous young director in Massa City, with a lot of social influence. General Ross would definitely not let his subordinates do it in such a place, let alone see Li Feng meddle in the research of the Hulk, so he had to come forward to warn. Episode 38. After the tanks and helicopters parked outside and the military personnel left, Li Feng's face was calm. He walked into the bedroom and took the White Queen into his arms. Li Feng was sure that he did not intend to interfere in this matter, and there was no need to interfere. You can't kill everyone just because you have a good relationship with Dr. Banner. That's not helping Dr. Banner, that's hurting him. Moreover, once he makes a move on the military, the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. will immediately find out that something is wrong, and then he will face not some enemies, but the entire American government. Pay for one's whistle. Honey, what happened? The White Queen asked sleepily. She could hear the conversations and things that happened downstairs just now. But she didn't know these people. It's an old friend who was arrested by the military as a wanted criminal. Li Feng did not mean to hide it, and explained casually, it's okay, don't care, the military doesn't dare to move us in Massa City. Hearing this, the White Queen did not mean to continue to ask. As long as Li Feng is by her side, she can feel a full sense of security. After the two lingered for a while, they went out to do what they had to do. As the entire Marvel world is vaguely moving towards Li Feng on the way to recovery, his life has become no longer peaceful. However, it is worth mentioning that the Marvel Studios company created by Feng has obtained investment from many parties and began to prepare for the filming of many films. In order to find the right actors, he will continue to personally lead his agency team in the next few days to find actors around the world, and the White Queen naturally followed him. For Feng, who was a Dubon 8th level boss in his previous life, he has always believed that there are only two most important points for making movies. The first is the story is not told well, and the movie is basically a piece of. The second is casting. If you cast garbage, even if the story is good and the character is good, it will become a piece of. Therefore, the casting and story of each movie are personally led by him. As for the White Queen, there is nothing uncomfortable with such a life. Compared to the days when she was in a gang of mutants, facing chaos and escapes at any time, this was the life she wanted. In other words, as long as she stays with Feng, she is willing to do anything. It's just that when she is in front of outsiders, the White Queen always has a cold face. But when facing the actor Feng wants to meet, she will become a little more enthusiastic. Although it still makes outsiders feel a sense of indifference that rejects people thousands of miles away, it has changed a lot compared to her, who was indifferent to everyone before. A philosopher once said that when you like someone, you want them to change for you. And to love someone, you can change yourself for the sake of the other person. The White Queen is like this, and she is slowly changing herself for Feng. Although the change was slow, the White Queen herself did not realize it. But after a certain amount of time, the White Queen looks back, and she herself may be shocked by her change. As for whether this change is a good thing or a bad thing, you can know it by looking at the tenderness in the eyes of the White Queen. The two have gotten along for a long time and have developed a lot of tacit understanding. Dayton, a military restricted area. As Dr. Banner was captured by General Ross's military district, he also fell into the infernal hell. While Feng was busy with the filming of the film, Dr. Banner was locked up by the military's Scientific Research Institute and suffered unimaginable torture. In order to understand the secrets of Banner's body, General Ross did not hesitate to let those chemists inject serum inhibitors and strong sedatives, two drugs with huge side effects on the body, into Dr. Banner's body, in order to prevent the Hulk from rushing out of Banner's body uncontrollably. In addition, General Ross even obtained some radioactive nuclear material from the military's arsenal. Anyone familiar with the plot of the movie should understand that his purpose in doing this, it is to create a new Hulk. Before that, General Ross decided to tame the uncontrolled guinea pig Banner. So during these few days, Banner was not even as good as the military prisoners. At least the captives still have the human rights and freedoms of a defeated country, but Banner is like an object that can only be slaughtered by others, and can do nothing. Banner was deeply aware of the malice from the military, and even though he agreed to let the Hulk take possession of his body, he couldn't do it under these powerful sedatives. So much so that Banner often wondered how wonderful it would have been to tear this gray-haired old fellow to shreds when he was mad in the suburbs. However, he seems to have no chance. 3 days after Banner's arrest, military men had a tube of spinal fluid removed from him. No one knows where this tube of spinal fluid is going. Dr. Banner fell into a brief slumber. And in the top-secret basement of the research room of this secret base, a very risky experiment is underway. This tube of spinal fluid, combined with gamma-ray radiation, is enough to make you a monster like that guy. General Ross put his hands behind his back with a faint sneer on his face. But I warn you, Sergeant, that I will not be responsible for your life if I fail. At this time, Emil Bronsky was covered in red fruit, his limbs were tied to a laboratory bed, and a chemist responsible for injecting sedatives and spinal fluids was standing by adjusting the proportions. General, Emil Bronsky grinned with a look of madness and longing on his face. Hurry up and start this damn experiment, I can't wait for a moment. I believe that I will succeed, and I will definitely gain this power. I am proud of the US military, even if I lose my life because of it. But General, if the experiment is successful, I hope you will grant my request. Give me your daughter. Hearing this, General Ross raised his head and laughed a few times, raised his hand and patted Emil Bulonsky's shoulder, and said, "A woman, as much as you want, I will give you as much, but you have to remember that you have been my subordinate all your life. What I let you do, you have to do, understand?" "Yes, General." Emil Bronsky nodded vigorously, looking resolute. "Let's start injecting." General Ross nodded to the chemist beside him and turned and walked out of the laboratory. "Sergeant, next you will feel great pain, don't worry, it's all normal. Spinal fluid will merge with your system in the presence of strong radiation. You need to resist this process yourself. If there is any discomfort on the way, I will inject you with a cardioton. If you are ready, I will start the injection." Episode 39. The chemist, wearing a white coat, confirmed Emil Bronsky, who was strapped to the test bench. Emil Bronsky looked hideous, stared at the light overhead with blood-red eyes, and muttered, "If it works, I will tear all of you to shreds." Everyone. The words fell, and a slender needle slowly pierced from the neck of Emil Bronsky. The immense pain came almost like a tidal wave, without any pause. Emil Bronsky gritted his teeth fiercely, the blood in his pupils gradually spread all over his eyes, but his face had a crazy sneer, and a fierce desire for war to happen. Yes. This is the purpose of General Ross. Use Hulk's serum and spinal fluid to create a more powerful existence than Hulk. Once successful, then General Ross will not hesitate to mass-produce this potion, and Dr. Banner will become the supply of countless Hulks from then on. By that time, the military will completely change under the leadership of General Ross. Even unify the world. Of course. What destroys the world and unifies the world? The old idea of unifying the world has always been the idea of the villain in the Marvel Universe. General Ross's thoughts are nothing more than that. Soon, tearing screams erupted in the laboratory. Outside the lab, General Ross was watching through the window what was happening inside. His eyes flashed with a desire for success, as well as terrible ambition. A large part of the reason for the idea of this experiment was because of the emergence of mutants. As a military region general of the United States, he is in a high position and holds military power, and it is naturally difficult to tolerate the appearance of mutants. Then, he learns about the experiments Banner is doing from S.H.I.E.L.D. information, which leads to the existence of the Hulk, and learns that his daughter has been helping Banner solve this problem. So, he decided to start the layout. And now, this bureau has reached the most critical period. As long as this experiment is successful, then the US Army will no longer be afraid of those mutants with special functions, let alone worry that the US government will one day be attacked and replaced by mutants. So, in the eyes of General Ross, this is a move that can change the future of the United States. General, the experimental values are very stable. At this time, the adjutant of the laboratory came up. In his hand, he held a tablet that monitored various signs of Emil Bronsky, and the values on it were within the expected range. But he hesitated, but still said, "However, General, I still advise you to avoid it, because we are not sure of the final result. If the spinal fluid cannot achieve a perfect fusion with Sergeant Emil Bronsky, then he may produce some changes that we dare not expect." The meaning of this phrase is obvious. I just don't dare to guarantee a 100% success rate. Activate the laboratory secondary defense system. I'll wait outside for your news. General Ross looked calm, and after casually giving an order, he turned and walked out of the laboratory. As the adjutant said, he also did not know whether the birth of the experiment would be an angel or a demon, or even a mouse in the sewers. If the experiment fails, he will destroy the laboratory immediately, and will not give Emil Bielanski any chance of survival. Because of this experiment, he did not report it to his superiors. Of course. Once successful, he will not hesitate to choose to report. When the time comes. Those generals of the older generation learned that they had made such a powerful monster army, and I am afraid that all kinds of honors would follow. However, what General Ross did not know was that terrible changes were taking place in the laboratory. A monster named Abomination is slowly being born uncontrollably. Half an hour later. General Ross, through the telephone equipment in the laboratory, called the adjutant in charge of all the experimental links. "How's it going? Was it successful?" he asked in a hurried tone. "General. The experiment was indeed a success, but the results seemed somewhat unexpected." When General Ross heard this, his brows furrowed and he asked, "Say it carefully." The adjutant stood outside the laboratory, looking through the window at the monster in the laboratory that was roaring and tearing the chemist's flesh and blood into his mouth, his forehead covered with sweat, and said in horror, He is eating people. Cannibalism?" General Ross gasped and rushed into the laboratory. When he saw that Sergeant Emil Bronsky had turned into a huge lizard monster with scales all over his body, his whole face froze. "General, we can immediately turn on the gas button in the laboratory and kill him." The adjutant took a while to calm down and quickly said. No. However, General Ross did not agree to the idea. He sneered, clasped his hands to his chest, and said, "See his eyes? That's human sanity. It's completely different from that green guy. I believe Colonel Bronsky, he is the best soldier, his will is harder than steel. He won't let us down, we're destined to succeed." After hearing General Ross's answer, the panic in the adjutant's eyes disappeared a little, but he still did not let his guard down, and his finger was placed on the poison gas release button next to him at any time. At this time, in the laboratory, the monster turned by Bronsky had broken free from the control of the operating table and crushed the chemist's body little by little in front of General Ross, until the ground was full of blood, and the flesh and blood had entered the abdomen, and he stopped. Power. That's the power I want. I'm going to kill. I'm going to eat meat. I'm going to shred all the garbage in this world. Emil Bronsky roared furiously towards the ceiling of the laboratory, and at the same time lost his mind and smashed all the instruments around him. At this moment, he is transformed into a monster like the Hulk. His body is full of power that has nowhere to vent, and the muscles and scales on his limbs make him look like a giant lizard that has crossed over in ancient times. Sergeant Emil Bronsky, can you hear me? I am your general and your creator, Ross. At the moment of the rage, a harsh voice sounded in the laboratory. Emil Bronsky slowly turned his head, looked at the one-way glass in the laboratory, brought his face up, and let out a strange smile. Episode 40, Yes, General, I remember you. General Ross clearly heard an evil in these words that should not belong to Emil Bronsky. Indeed, as a soldier of the United States, Emil Bronsky's willpower and spiritual power, as General Ross said, were unwavering. But the first thing anyone in this world, after having gained power, must do is to overthrow everything in front of them. Having become an abomination, Emil Bronsky did not show enough respect for General Ross. Good. General Ross's voice came again. Sergeant Emil Bronsky, congratulations on your makeover. As your general, I give you a new name, Abomination. Next, you will. The words have not yet fallen. A huge fist instantly pierced through the thick wall. Immediately afterwards, Emil Bronsky peeled off the bricks on both sides and walked out of the laboratory. There was a terrifying smile on his scaly face. You, what are you doing? The adjutant standing next to General Ross could no longer hold back the fear in his heart and directly rang the alarm bell in the laboratory. Click. But in the next second, this guy's head was screwed off by Emil Bronsky and stepped on into a puddle of thin mud. General Ross, Emil Bronsky licked the corners of his mouth. I love to hate the title. As a thank you for creating me, I am willing to let you go. But I won't listen to any of your orders, because what I want to do, you will definitely not agree to. Looking at the tall and hideous body in front of him, General Ross's expression remained calm except for a little cold sweat in his palms. He didn't seem surprised by the anti-water of abomination, but instead asked with a gloomy face, what do you want to do? The corner of his mouth smiled coldly, and he casually grabbed the corpse of the adjutant on the ground and stuffed it into his mouth. A dozen seconds later, hearing the words of abomination in his ear, General Ross collapsed to the ground, his eyes full of horror. Then, without the slightest pause, abomination directly smashed through the closed layer above his head and jumped towards the upper level of the laboratory. Not long after, countless screams and fighting sounds sounded one after another. And Banner, who was lying in the petri dish, was woken up by a loud noise just at this moment. He slowly opened his eyes, and a touch of green gradually filled his pupils. Meanwhile, taking advantage of the matter at hand, Feng did not return to the villa as soon as the plane landed, but took the White Queen to stroll around the city center. Without the harassment of S.H.I.E.L.D, and no mutants coming to the door to find trouble, Feng was certainly happy. It's impossible to stay in that villa every day and wait for trouble to come to you, right? As expected, the villa he lives in now is estimated to have become the focus of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's also nice to come out and shop occasionally. Of course, the White Queen did not have any unwillingness. Anyway, as long as she could be with Feng, she would not refuse, no matter what she did. The two of them were like couples on the road, holding hands and leaning very close. Every time he walked through a shop selling clothes, Feng would take the hand of the White Queen and go in to try on clothes. This is the daily routine of Feng and the White Empress. Show affection, spread dog food, and enjoy life. At this time, the two passed a television store that was broadcasting news. On the screen, a noisy smashing sound sounded, attracting the attention of the two. Feng looked puzzled and glanced at it quietly. This glance made him stunned in place. What's wrong? The White Queen noticed the abnormality and looked at the screen. I saw that in the picture, a helicopter was doing a live broadcast report over Dayton City, and in the city below the camera, hundreds of people were running for their lives, screaming. A huge lizard monster is located in the middle of the city, stampede everywhere, and kill people when they see them, which is the source of the sensation. What happened? The White Queen covered her mouth slightly. This kind of news is not common. She immediately thought of mutants. But Feng quickly shook his head at her and said, honey, let's go, it's okay with us, but it looks scary. The White Queen frowned, her eyes always fixed on the huge lizard. Feng didn't have the idea of pulling her away, and the reason why he was stunned was because he saw the hatred. Too fast. Abhor the point in time it appears, something is not quite right. Although in the movie, after Dr. Banner was captured by the military, it didn't take long for the abomination to be created, but know that this is the narrative time of the movie. This is the real Marvel world. But having said that, Feng had no intention of making a splash. Unsurprisingly, it won't be long before an earth-shattering monster fight takes place in Dayton, where the Hulk will engage in a life-and-death battle with Abomination. Although his city of Massa is only a line away from Dayton, he is not a superhero and cannot be a bird. Moreover, even if these two guys fight fiercely, in the end, there will still be people from S.H.I.E.L.D. to stop them. What Feng didn't know was that with the emergence of his idea, S.H.I.E.L.D., located in the center of the United States, received the news as soon as possible and sent an aerospace carrier to Dayton City. And on the mothership, there was a man named Thor. In the video, the hideous and ugly lizard monster is still wreaking havoc in the city, and the passing crowd in front of him is like ants, and he steps on the meat with his feet up. Cool. Is this the thrill of unbridled killing? Ha 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 ha. You ants. Give me all death. Abomination roared while tearing at human lives. After his mandatory retirement from the battlefield, he has not killed so brazenly for a long time. From another point of view, Abomination is a soldier who loves violence and war very much. But his power is too small for him to create his own living environment. So, he was forced to retire. In his eyes, this was an experience that humiliated his life. If he can't fight, can't kill, can't see blood, then what's the point of him being a soldier? So, after gaining the same terrifying power as the Hulk, he did not hesitate to release the demon in his heart. And General Ross, who caused all this consequences, finally realized that he had completely played off. He originally only wanted to get Banner's power to expand the strength of the American army. But now it seems that he has simply created an uncontrolled monster.